Here is how I turned this into this.
Strabby.
So I finished playing Bugsnax about a month ago, and I think I was a little bit late to the party on this, but essentially there's these creatures called Bugsnax that are sort of like a mix between a snack or a food and some kind of bug or animal. So one of them is called a Strabby, and it runs around and it's really adorable. So I thought that would be a good character to use for this video concept. I think it's really important for videos like this to keep the idea as simple as possible. So in this case, it's like one location, one character, two if you count Strabby. This way you can all right, you want to be in the behind the scenes? If you keep your ideas simple like this, you can spend a lot of time focusing on that simple idea and refining as much as you can. So when it came to shooting the video, I sort of planned out my shots as I went. Normally I would make a shot list and a storyboard, but this is such a short, basic concept, and I don't need to communicate with any other production crew.
Are you sure about that?
So I just kind of made up as I went. So I knew I needed a shot reverse shot of me and the strawberry in the beginning of the video, but then it struck me, if I'm acting, who's behind the camera? Let's just say I have the best cinematographer in the business. So my first big hurdle was finding a way to make the strawberry wiggle. My first thought was, I'll do it all with VFX because that's what I do professionally. I'm a visual effects artist, so like obviously just CGI strawberry, right? All I would have to do is leave a perfectly sized space in the strawberries for the CGI strawberry, 3D scan of the strawberries, capture an HDR, track the scene, reconstruct the geometry using the animate the strawberry realistically. Simply, I would just have to match the lighting, posit it in. Or I could just turn a full day of work into about 30 minutes of work by doing it practically. So instead, I cut a hole in the bottom of the strawberry container. You can sort of see the hole at the end of the short if you look close enough, but I figured no one's really looking that close. With that hole in place, I just stuck an Allen wrench through the hole and into the base of the strawberry, and I was able to wiggle it a little bit with my finger in the shot, and I think it worked pretty well.
Of time never lasts.
So now it's time to talk visual effects. For this shot of the Strabby running along the counter, I started with the handheld shot that was timed roughly to how quickly I thought it would run. You gotta pick the spot. I captured an HDRI of the lighting using my 360 camera, and then I made sure to get a shot of the hero strawberry.
Who's gonna save the innocent strawberries from the crimes?
Hero strawberry! So I can use that for reference later. So in post-production, step one for the shot was to track the footage. So I intentionally placed a bunch of this junk along the counter because it helps to have like clear points to track. In hindsight, I should not have used this glasses cleaner bottle. Generally, you don't want to try to track surfaces that are reflective or transparent. So with the footage in Syntheyes, I first started with an auto track. Then I started manually tracking as many points as I could, and removing bad auto tracks, and refining auto tracks, and refining manual tracks, generally banging my head into the keyboard until I had a solve error that was acceptable for this shot.
Acceptable!
After that, I ran the lens workflow to get an undistorted version of the footage. Essentially, every lens has some kind of distortion. In VFX, we like to solve for this distortion so that we can basically match the distortion between our CG objects and our footage. Once I was done with the track, I imported it into Blender to do a basic layout. Essentially what a layout is just setting up your camera where it needs to be in the scene, making sure the scale of everything is correct, and also adding necessary geometry. So for a shot like this, the scene geometry doesn't need to be super realistic, so all I really did for this one was basically basic geometry for the counter, and then super rough proxy objects for some of these other things on the counter. Sometimes you need really realistic geometry, but in this case, I just needed a basic shadow catcher for the floor, and the other objects are just for reference when I'm animating. So with this layout done, it was time to work on the Strabby asset, and for this, I jumped into Side Effects Houdini. Houdini is a really powerful node-based 3D software. It's used in tons of movies that you've seen to create simulations and procedural geometry. First, I started by pulling up references of the Strabby from Bugsnax and real strawberries. It's really important to have reference, trust me on this. So I then began building the base shape of the strawberry and then used a bunch of noise modifiers to add those imperfections that you get in real life fruits. The surface is never perfectly smooth. Next, I needed to make the seeds. So for this, I modeled a few different seeds that are mostly the same but have slight differences and then instanced them across the surface of the strawberry. I added random size variation and slight offsets to the rotation, again adding to these imperfections that I mentioned earlier. Once I had the seeds in place, I was able to use their positions to offset the surface of the strawberry to get that indentation that you see. And the beautiful thing about Houdini is that now that I have this whole node setup built procedurally, I can modify the amount of seeds that I want, the size of the seeds, and the general shape of the strawberry, and everything sort of just automatically fits into place because I built it procedurally. To be honest, for this project, I didn't really need to build it procedurally because I needed just one strawberry. Procedural is usually good for like when you need to do a ton of iterations in a production. So I could put like 50 different versions of the strawberry that are all slightly different, and the director or whoever can pick which one they like best. But it's just me in this case, so it wasn't really necessary. I just did it because I like Houdini and it's good practice. So then once I finished modeling the legs and the eyes and the stem, I exported it to Blender for look dev and texturing. Remember that HDRI that I said I captured earlier? This is where it comes in handy. I loaded it into Blender so that I could get accurate lighting for my scene. So basically it uses the brightness and the color values of that image to create sort of a spherical map that lights my scene. Then I pulled up my reference image of my hero strawberry. And all I had to do was make the CG strawberry match the hero strawberry. So I did some basic hand painting of textures to get the different hues. So you have like reds and you have some sort of like white colors near the base, and then you have these different orange hues. I then used some procedural noises to add even more imperfection to that color. Like I said, imperfection, super important. Sometimes this is super subtle, don't really notice it, but without it, it's really obvious. I then used a mixture of procedural noises and texture maps to add bump and roughness variation. This is also super important for getting realistic CG. And then, as a final step, which probably wasn't necessary because you never see the strawberry close up enough to even notice this, I added tiny little hair particles across the surface because you do see this on some strawberries. That was probably just for me. You really don't notice it in the short. I then used the same texturing process for the seeds and the eyes, and then for the leaves, I found some cool leaf textures on Quixel Megascans. So now that the CG strawberry and the hero strawberry are matching, it's time to get on to rigging and animation. So I built a very basic rig and animation blocking to start. Animation blocking is just trying to get the timing right, so I know it needs to fall down and then run across the counter and then jump off at the end. So I wanted to make sure the timing of that fit well into the edit. Then I just refined the animation and rendered it out. For compositing, I didn't really have a ton of work to do for this shot. I got it really close in the raw render, which you don't always do. So all I really had to do was some basic grain matching, a little bit of hue and saturation adjustments on the strawberry, and then the most important thing was rotoscoping out this dollar bill and the AirPods that pass in front of him. Because without that, he's just gonna be on top of the footage, but you need him to be behind these objects. So you roto them out and added a layer on top, and suddenly he's integrated into the scene. So basically I just repeated this process for the other VFX shots in the scene. Except for this shot, I did add a tiny bit of dust floating in the air. To do this, I opened up Houdini again. First, I ran a smoke simulation using the Axiom solver. This is a plugin for Houdini that allows you to run simulations very quickly by using your GPU. Then I used the smoke simulation to advect particles. This basically takes the velocity values of the smoke and uses it to influence the particles. With it, you get that kind of like nice airflow feel to the dust that you see in real life. Then I instanced a bunch of little dust geometry onto these particles and randomized their size and rotations. And to be honest, you don't really see much of it in the final video because it's such a shallow depth of field and the particles are so tiny. But for effects like this, sometimes you want them to be really subtle. You don't really want to distract the audience from the story with like a giant puff of dust for no reason. So yes, I did do a smoke simulation and a particle simulation just so you could see these two tiny specks of dust floating in the air. But I think it's worth it. Subtlety sometimes adds a lot. visual effects finished and the edit locked, I spent a decent amount of time on sound design, and I did like a basic color grade, and I exported the video. So I wanted to thank everyone over on my TikTok for being so supportive. I didn't realize there were so many people that loved Bugsnax this much, and it made me really happy to see that you guys all enjoyed this video. I hope some of you found your way over to this YouTube channel, and if you haven't already, go check out the final Bugsnax video on my YouTube channel. If you want to see more behind the scenes filmmaking content like this, please subscribe to my channel, consider following me on TikTok. I plan to make a lot more videos like this in the future, and also, given the reception of this video, I think Bugsnax Part 2 is coming. Thanks for watching.
Hero Strawberry!